It's only been a short 6 weeks since genLOCK premiered, and now we're already at the finale. Episode 8 of genLOCK has just aired, and I think it did the season pretty well justice, but I'll let each of you be the judge of that. I will say spoiler warning for this episode, as I'm not going to be showing the episode itself or clips from it in this video, so I'll leave a link down in the description below so you guys can go to Rooster Teeth first and watch it there before watching the review. I will, however, be showing images of the episode and going over the events, analyzing them, so we can see what we can gain from it. So, without further ado, let's get right into the episode. And luckily, this episode doesn't leave us wondering as to what happened to the people of Anvil, as Megas is trying to call Julian, albeit not having luck, whether it's because Julian's mixing in from his Holon or whatever reason, he just can't get through. Everyone else is preparing to move the upgraded Holons somewhere. We're not 100% sure where that's going to be, but Cammy's actually painting Renegade on the side of the carrier, so maybe they have some other plans for it, as is kind of revealed later in the episode, but Megas is eventually able to get through to Cammy. And of course, the genLOCK team is pretty surprised to see him, like, how exactly are you alive? Wait, is Dr. Weller alive? And here's where we get confirmation that in fact, Dr. Weller is not alive, which most of us kind of assumed, considering he set off a bomb that was meant to take out soldiers, and he was right holding it. So, yeah, Dr. Weller is unfortunately dead, which he was a great character. I am sad to see him go, but it's good that when they kill off a character, they have him stay dead, which a lot of other series, you know, sometimes have trouble with. But anyways, Megas reveals as to how they're alive. A couple weeks prior, Dr. Weller had figured out the code that the Union had actually used in the microchips that all the soldiers are carrying, making the nanotech just avoid them, and kind of gave that to the Vanguard. So that's what they were able to use and protect themselves from the nanotech. And with that, he's able to send the code to Cammy, because she wants to be hooked up with it, and, well, there's another attack now that the Union is going to be putting on in Chicago. And with the nanotech under control, that they're able to avoid being eaten alive by it, they want to make a counterstrike. Of course, they want the genLOCK team to take care of Nemesis, as that's the biggest issue for them right now. And Julie and everyone else is completely fine with getting another shot at Nemesis, especially now that they've got all their upgrades. So that's what they do. The Vanguard's going to go take on the Union in Chicago itself, and the genLOCK team's going to draw out Nemesis, take care of it, ideally destroy it in a separate location. So Cammy's using her upgraded tech to kind of sense whether the Nemesis is coming towards them or not, and Julian's purpose is to antagonize it. And that's how they plan to draw it out, because he's on the same network, so of course you can just say some things, put it out into the void, and Nemesis will come running. Surprisingly, it works by just pretty much saying, you know, if you're the real Julian, how come you're just a Union slave? I would never be a Union slave. You're supposed to be the real one. Why are you just a puppet? Saying things like that gets the Nemesis to come running. Well, not running, as I predicted in my last review, Nemesis can now fly. I initially thought that Nemesis was going to be able to get the tech from the Anvil that had upgraded Julian's wings, and he was going to use that kind of tech. No, that's not what happened. The Vanguard still has control of the Anvil. They were able to get past the nanotech there, and I don't understand why the Union didn't try to take Anvil and all the tech that it had, because it has all the genLOCK technology in it, but apparently they just sent out the nanotech, tried to kill everyone there, and then Nemesis took off after genLOCK, didn't decide to stay and wipe out everyone else there, because frankly, if the Nemesis just stayed, busted into friggin' the Anvil, and tried to take out everyone there, it could have. There wasn't really anything they could do against it, but no, apparently it just took off. Once the soldiers were able to get past the nanotech, they just took out the rest of the Union soldiers and still have control of Anvil. So they didn't get the tech from there, and yet they're able to upgrade Nemesis to the point where he can fly at Mach 1. Or at least Mach 1, because there was definitely breaking of the sound barriers. He rushed in and took out Julian. Not only that, he's got some other upgrades. In a month, 2 months, however long it's been since the attack on Anvil, the Union has been able to upgrade their nanotech from the point of being able to, you know, just be a mist and block signal or degrade bioorganic material. It can now form solid material. The Nemesis uses it to form a sword, can use it to form shields in response to specific bullets that it can sense being fired, and it can form a gun as well. Like, the nanotech has become so diverse that it's pretty impressive. And not only that, the Polity, the Vanguard, has just gotten the code to crack the nanotech and be able to avoid it. But now, even though it was sent to Cammy by Migas, it's not working against the nanotech that the Nemesis is using because it switched its code. So, if the Nemesis has already switched its code, why hasn't the rest of the Union that's attacking Chicago? We don't hear anything about that, and apparently the attack ends up succeeding, but still, it would make sense that they would be able to change that code too, unless they're just forfeiting that section of the Union that's being attacking Chicago. I don't understand how they weren't able to do that, but anyways, needless to say, the Nemesis is kind of manhandling everyone on the genLOCK team. Since they are functioning individually, the Nemesis can read all of their movements. So of course, mind sharing is the solution. So Kazu and Cammy end up mind sharing. They invite to Julian, like, hey, you know, join up with us, but Julian's a little bit too hesitant, so they go off on their own. And they do end up doing some damage to the Nemesis. They're actually effective against it and are able to actually rip off one of its arms. However, they are eating up their uptime a little bit fast, and even though they do dismember an arm of the Nemesis, there's one little extra factor that the nanotech has already added in. It can now self-regenerate. And as I mentioned before, it's only been at most like a month or two since the attack on Anvil, I think. And yet, in that month or two, the amount of progress that the Union has made in this nanotech is kind of incredible. They must have had at least some of this before, but I don't know why they didn't implement it till now. Because they've had the Nemesis, they've had the Holon, because it said that the brain has been active for 4 years, so they've had this brain. They've had the Nemesis for 4 years. And let's just say they were spending the 4 years to upgrading it to the point that they have it now, and that's why they finally implemented it. Maybe they had this tech before and they just didn't implement it till now, but that's a major jump in just a short period of time. Being able to self-regenerate, mold it into a gun, sword, shields, as well as fly, like a huge upgrade for the Nemesis. But since Mindshare is working, that's what they end up needing to do. It shows Valentina and Yasemin end up mind-sharing, and they want to get all 5 of them. 5 working as one is going to work. But Julian's being a bit hesitant about that. His mind is the only thing he has left. His body has been crippled, and he's lost everything. So all he's got is his mind. Melding with people will affect that. Everyone else is being very supportive, saying, you know, this isn't really living, just staying in one place, not letting other people in, not changing, not evolving. And yeah, mind sharing might change you, but it's living, letting new people in. And with that, though, this signal hits for uptime the limit is almost being reached, because they're kind of mind sharing at this point between Cammy, Kazu, Valentina, and Yasemin. Yeah, their uptime limit is definitely being reached. And at that point, Julian says, you know what? You're right. It's time for me to make a change. And he decides, I will buy you the time that you guys need to re-download and then get back here into your Holons. He's deciding to sacrifice his body and pretty much become similar or in the same situation as Nemesis. Not the same as Nemesis, because he's avoided all the torture and everything like that. But before they can finish that discussion, an intruder shows up. Nemesis itself pops into the little discussion that they're having, so Julian just tells everyone to run, get out of here, go do what you need to do, and come back. I will take care of this guy. And so that's what he does. He ends up going 1v1 against Nemesis, and, well, Nemesis is just kind of messing with him, saying you still have time, you can still escape to my body, things like that, and we see the uptime limit be reached. And once the uptime limit is reached, it switches to download prohibited. So the second you exceed uptime, or within like a minute or so, you can no longer download. Your brain just no longer downloads, and then his body goes dark. It looks like the life support has just been turned off, and is he just declared dead at this point? I'm guessing so, but that seems a bit hasty, that there's not a bit of a buffer there that, okay, maybe put the uptime limit maybe like a couple minutes before like their brain would actually be shut off and their body would just be declared dead? Maybe? Because if it reaches the uptime limit and then the warning signs appear, they need time to get back to a safe place. I don't know. I'm sure there was enough time put in there, but if they're mind sharing, they need enough time to get out of it. It feels almost wrong that it's just like, okay, limit reached, you're dead. It feels a little bit off. At this point now, the 1v1's not going so well. Julian is getting overpowered, and in fact, one strike that the Nemesis gives him seems awfully close to the electronic brain. This is all Julian's got now. He gave up his body, so if the Holon goes down, there's nowhere for him to download to. He's just done, so he needs to be a little bit more careful with it, I think. And the Nemesis is still trying to mess with him, but Julian decides to mess back a little bit by just tapping his head and giving him a little bit of Julian's memories and making him kind of freak out, but kind of backfires as the Nemesis sees a picture of the entire genLOCK team in their human bodies. Oh, well, Nemesis has the idea, I'll just make sure they can't re-download, because they're just squishy little humans right now, so I can just take them out. So Nemesis traps Julian and goes after the Holon team in the carrier that they initially had. And that's not boding so well for the team, as the rockets they try to fire off just aren't doing anything. But a savior does appear. Sinclair's Holon. And, you know, they're wondering, is that Sinclair, is it not? But we can hear that the voice that the Holon has is actually Leon. We learned in a previous episode that he was genLOCK compatible, but he's a little bit too old and there are some, shall we say, dangers involved. Needless to say, Sinclair's Holon, or Leon, is able to buy a little bit of time, but not that much, as he is just in a basic Holon. No upgrades, no extra armor or anything of that sort, so he is taking quite a bit of damage quite quickly. Miranda hops out of her mech, and it stops the Nemesis in its tracks for another couple seconds to, you know, stall just a little bit longer until Julian shows back up. And once he does, he realizes that, hey, I don't need to worry about uptime anymore. I can mod myself as however I want. So he just ups some things to max, puts down like pain receptors and others to minimum, and just goes to town and is able to do some decent damage to the Nemesis. The Nemesis then goes for a larger scale attack by slamming its hands into the ground and having nanotech pretty much come like spires right out of the ground towards Julian, which is a pretty big scale attack, and it is effective, and then the rest of the team shows up to, you know, team up and take out the Nemesis, which works marvelously well. The Nemesis can no longer read their movements, and they are just taking it apart. Kazu is slicing pieces off of it, they're blasting it with Yasmin's lasers. The Nemesis is not doing well, and then they're all able to pin it in its own mind, and Julian is able to actually access its mind, take out the nano code, give it to Cammy so it can deactivate its nanotechnology, as we see it do an even larger scale attack of the one that it had just done. Slams its hands against the ground and pretty much creates a nano tsunami to go attack the genLOCK team. How? How does it have this much nanotech? Unless they're storing the nanotech underneath the ground, which, since this is Chicago, and they're attacking it, I don't think this is Union territory, so I don't think they just have nanotech flowing through the sewers or anything like that. But nanotech, yes, it's a mist and everything, so it can take up more space because it's more spread out, but in this case, it's more solidly packed and dense together to actually do damage to something, because the Holons are metal, it needs to be metal to actually, you know, pierce through it or anything like that. Even if this is just a hollow shell, it still needs to be strong enough to pierce the Holons as the Nemesis is intending. How does it have this much nanotech? I don't understand how it has this much on its actual unit, because it just doesn't seem possible, because there's such a big scale of nanotech to get an attack that big. Like, this wave of nanotech is like friggin' 5-7 times as tall as the Nemesis, not to mention it's thicker as well. Like, I don't understand where all this nanotech came from, but needless to say, Cammy is able to modify the code very quickly and deactivate the nanotech that the Nemesis has. So it is lost. The Nemesis has fallen. The nanotech has disintegrated. Even the arm that it created out of nanotech is gone. And Julian walks up to give the finishing blow, and asks the Nemesis, "What do I do?" Because that's him. He's supposed to, what, kill himself? That's gotta be hard for him. But the Nemesis then does what Julian did it before, touches his hand to Julian's head and gives him a little bit of his memories. And tells him what to do. Kill the copies. Plural this time. Not just kill the copy as Nemesis intended to just kill Julian, but now that shows an image of hundreds of them. So obviously the Union had mass-produced Julian. A copy of a copy of a copy, as the Nemesis says. Just duplicated them out in mass production, and that's what we're going to have to deal with from now on. There was the one Nemesis, that was the initial copy, probably a lot more adaptable at fighting. The rest of them are going to be more like drones, more likely, because they're going to have less memories, less humanistic approaches, more, programmable type thing. So the Nemesis is now dead, but we're going to have to deal with an entire friggin' colony of them afterwards. And the battle has now ended. We don't see anything of the actual Battle of Chicago with the Vanguard versus the Union, but now it's finished. And after the battle, we see Leon going to download, and he's not looking forward to it. Apparently uploading was a bit of a hassle, probably quite painful or something along those lines, so he's not looking forward to it. And once he does download, we see that his brain has taken a lot of damage, and he's now either in a coma or potentially not even in there anymore. So that's pretty devastating. And we see everyone, the Colonel, talk to the genLOCK team, saying, well, what do we do now? Why don't you come back to the anvil? Things like that, but the team needs to discuss it. Julian, however, goes over to talk to Miranda, and they both agree that they aren't the same people they were 4 years ago. So, not necessarily giving up hope on continuing a relationship. I mean, Julian's kind of in a Holon right now, and that's his actual body now, so I feel like that might pose a problem for some of the relationship, but I don't think Julian's actually going to stay in the Holon forever. They might get him a synthetic body or something along those lines, as technology is going to have to improve for this series, but they both decide to take it day by day, just say hey once in a while, things like that. And then the genLOCK team decides to not go back to the anvil, but they do ask to take Migas with them as an engineer, and they go off to somewhere. I don't know whether they're just going to stay in this carrier. They're going to need to go to a place to refuel and recharge and everything of that sort. So I don't know if they're going to take a new base themselves and just have it hidden from everyone, or I don't know where exactly they're going to go. Plus, there's also, 5 of them being still in their physical bodies. They're going to need to have food. They're going to need to have other resources available to them. So they're either going to have to set down like every week or so, or something. They need another lab to make upgrades. They need so much stuff that I think they're probably going to have their own base, but I don't know exactly where that's going to be. The credits start to roll, but after the credits, they do give us a little bit more. As most series start to do nowadays, they give us just a little bit to help us look forward to the next season. Somewhere in the Union, we see a group of soldiers, and one of them oddly runs off into an alley. And when it takes off its helmet, it reveals Sinclair. Obviously a bit beaten up, looks like he was probably tortured, but he's still himself, and wanting to get out of the Union. And that's all we see, that's where it ends, and that leaves us wondering what is in store for the next season. Now there's quite a bit, as I mentioned, that we have to look forward to. This jump in technology that we've already seen from the Nemesis in just a month or two has progressed so much. So how far is the Union going to take it? Like, the power scaling in this series is, I'm really interested in how it's going to actually turn out. We've seen so far how the Holons of the genLOCK team have progressed from just stereotypical, mechs that are just humanoid machine bodies to having lasers, wings, drones, giant swords, giant guns attached to them, cloaking. How exactly is it going to progress in the future is a question that I'm really interested in, because the Nemesis made a heck of a jump as well, from just being a Holon frame that has 4 arms and could overpower any just other regular Holon frame, to being able to fly at Mach speed, to being able to control nanotech in so many different ways, that it's a highly advanced thing. And not to mention, if there's going to be so many others mass-produced, probably not to the same degree, but still, how exactly it's going to progress is going to be a question from now on. Not to mention, next season is probably going to be where we get to learn about Polity and the Union, where we're actually going to go to the Union, probably on a rescue mission for Sinclair. Now that we know he's alive, that's where we're probably going to be headed. If he gets some message out to someone in Polity, the Vanguard, or the genLOCK team itself, possibly being able to find a way to mindshare with them, I doubt that case, but in some way, shape, or form, he's going to contact them. And they're probably actually going to go to the Union, maybe undercover, some of the genLOCK team or some of the Vanguard, and maybe that's how there'll be a rescue mission for them. But they're going to go to get Sinclair, as he'll be another valuable member of the genLOCK team. Not to mention there might be other people who are genLOCK compatible that are introduced, and maybe more Holons will be produced. Although we do know that the Union does have the Holon technology, or they had the Holon, and have mass-produced the Nemesis brains to some extent, so we have that to look forward to as well. Mainly, I am looking forward to finding out more about the Union and Polity in general, as we don't know really anything about their principles, what this war is being fought about. Sure, it's a cultural war, but based on what? So there's a lot that we have to look forward to. And now that Cammy has the code to deactivate the nanotech, maybe she can create a code to control the nanotech as well, or take it away from the Union. And maybe the Polity could start using the nanotech for their benefit as well. Though that would be dangerous if it's just a constant battle of controlling the nanotech back and forth between the Union and Polity. That would make for not a great battle, to be honest, but still it would be something interesting to think about. And then there's always the Renegade, where their new base is going to be. As I mentioned already, they're going to need a place to put down. They're going to need an actual base of operations that's more than just this carrier, because they need a lab to develop new technology. Because if they stay the same, you're damn well sure that the Union is going to improve theirs. So it's going to be a technological war, and that's what's going to end up being the victor, is who's going to be able to advance it the most to, you know, win. And another thing that was also interesting, when at the beginning of the episode, the genLOCK team was parting ways with Dr. Ja, Caliban was looking back at her, like the Doctor would, almost longingly. Dr. Ja was confused by this, and Julian kind of pushed Caliban along, but it's more than just the Doctor's ideas in there. It's a piece of his memory. So he remembers his feelings for Dr. Ja. So maybe, if Julian's eventually able to get a synthetic body, maybe they'll be able to give Caliban a synthetic body and bring back the Doctor in that sense as well. Maybe regenerate some of his brain or something? I don't know. Which also brings up the point that the Doctor's bomb that went off didn't destroy the lab. Killed all the soldiers that were in there, but St. Leon was still able to get into the pod to connect to Sinclair's Holon. So, yeah. The Doctor's bomb is obviously something different. It didn't destroy the room around it. It blasted the glass, but I guess that was just a shockwave of it. It was more maybe an air shockwave or something, just meant to melt the person's brain or something along those lines. It would shatter the glass but leave the pods intact and the technology still there. I don't exactly know how that worked, but the pods are still there. And now that Leon is being taken to Artasa to have his brain examined and hopefully healed by that, then that opens the opportunity as well, if they're the area for neurological research, that's where Julian is going to be able to return to his body. Now that they have the code for the nanotech, they can remove the nanotech from Julian's body as well, deactivate it, remove it, possibly regenerate his body, regenerate his brain to the point where he can actually return to it. That is what I would imagine would happen, but we're going to have to wait and see. Other than that, there's not really too much more we can gain for what to expect next season. I'm fully expecting us going to the Union, rescuing Sinclair, and technology being advanced, but a lot of it we're going to just have to wait and see. So let me know what you guys think, how you think this wrapped up the first season, and what you would like to see in the next season. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and I'll see you guys in the next video.